atheist, relax for a second, because I know what you're thinking. You're sitting here thinking, what is this girl about to say about the existence of God that I haven't heard before? Is she going to try to force her beliefs on me? If we keep it real, you're tired of people twisting your arm to believe when there's no evidence to back it up. Truth be told, you believe in pure science rather than God. You believe that the universe as we know it came to being from a Big Bang. Now you may say, like many scientists, you think that the first life formed in some primordial soup over millions and millions and millions of years ago. But think about this. Was there any scientists there when it happened? Did any one of them ever observe it happening? Or do they have any proof of it happening? We all know the answer is no. See, on that basis alone, you have no reason to believe evolution, because it has not been observed. Therefore, it is not scientific. In order for something to be considered science, it has to be observed. Otherwise, it's blind faith. No one has ever observed a Big Bang, or even an ape mutating into a man for that matter. Not to mention, Nebraska Man was nothing more than a tooth connected to a mythological jawbone. The jawbone was connected to the skull, which was connected to a skeleton, which was then given a face, features, and fur. Man, we've heard of Piltdown Man, Neanderthal Man, and others. How many hoaxes will it take for you to be fed up with these frauds? Now you can very well argue, well, you weren't there in the beginning with God, so you can't prove God's existence scientifically either. And that's actually true. The fact is, neither one of us were there in the beginning. Okay? So what we have to do is look at where the evidence falls. We have to look at the option that is most rational. Does life show intelligence, or is this all the result of chance? Well, the first purported proof, it's actually a logical proof for the existence of God that I'm going to present to you today, is actually the argument from design. What that says is that all design requires a designer. The universe has design. Therefore, the universe has a designer. Right? Now, on the atheistic worldview, there's no way to explain this good fortune. The atheist must put this down to chance. When we observe nature, whether on a small level like cells or protein, or a large level like the universe, we see precision and purpose. From that observation, we can infer that there is intelligence behind it all. John Hofstra, a former professor of philosophy at USC, he said, "We all know pieces of clay don't come together by themselves and form bricks, nor bricks come together to form a house. That requires designing activity of human beings." Now, in the same way, particles of matter cannot come together on their own to form complex living cells, or cells to form complex living organisms that inhabit the earth. Such a result can be brought about only by a designer. If I ask you, do you understand what's on this page? Can everyone understand?
Yeah.
The reason that we understand it is because it's English. We all know English in this room, right? But the thing is, even on that page, there's no information on that page, right? The reason that I say that is because there's only squiggles of ink, or there's only letters on that page. Because information actually is communication between minds. In order for minds to communicate, there has to be a common language which exists before any communication. So language is only a representation of something intangible. When we look around us, we see a lot of these place marks. For example, the number 1 is only a token. Before we began talking as a child, how do we recognize the language of our parents? If the information wasn't already in us to do so. Similarly, it's like this when we look into DNA. Like information which is already in us so that we can communicate, DNA contains information or a code to communicate. But before DNA could be useful, there had to be a language previously established. The genetic code had to exist before the existence of DNA and come from outside of DNA. The information found in DNA had to be imposed on the DNA by a mind. Language takes information. Whether we're talking about reading music, speaking English, or DNA, information needs an informer. So then, where do actual events come from? Each event comes from a previous event. But what happens when you trace the process backward? Logically, it had to have a beginning. Thus, we're faced with something like creation. The smallest event leads us back to a mystery which lies outside of natural science. Think about this. In Hamlet, a branch breaks and Ophelia is drowned. Did she die because the branch broke, or because Shakespeare wanted her to die at that particular point in the play? Either, both, whichever you please. The alternative suggested by the question is not a real alternative at all once you realize the fact that Shakespeare is making the whole play. Well, let's look at the likelihood of a universe coming into existence by pure coincidence. Another way of looking at the fact that the universe is not a product of coincidence, we can simply look around. Look around, or look within yourself, your own body. Like, what evolved first? The blood vessels, the heart, or the blood? What part of the eye evolved first? The lens, the retina, the eye fluid, the eyelashes, or the millions of nerve fibers which transmit information to a complex computing center in the brain called the visual cortex? Which means the brain had to be there too. And which part of the brain was there first? The auditory or visual part, the part which controls the movement? Darwin labeled this dilemma as the problem of organs of extreme perfection and complication. He also said in the famous Origin of Species, "I'm quite conscious that my speculations run quite beyond the bounds of true science." If you are rational, a rational being, then you have to look at all this evidence that I've presented and see that the facts point to intelligence rather than chance. So stop being irrational, ex-atheist. Stop being led by blind faith and believe the evidence which demands a verdict